Okay, we are live and we are right on time. It looks like some people are still trickling in, but I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Marcella Poloski, Sales Coordinator here at ERP-One and your host for the session. Before we get started, I'd like to share a bit more about who we are. ERP-One is a specialized ERP solutions partner with a focus on JD Edwards. Whether it's technical consulting, application support, development, or project management, we've been helping clients navigate their ERP journey for over 20 years. We also provide long-term support options like staff augmentation and managed services, working closely with our clients to drive real results and long-term value from their systems. Today's presentation, Operational Excellence, Strategies for Mastering JDE Continuous Delivery, will be led by Matt Vanderkoy. Matt is ERP-One's CRO. He works across sales, marketing, and delivery to ensure everything we do aligns with our mission to support both current and future JDE customers. And we're also excited to be joined by Adrian Kalinchuk, JDE Program Manager at the District of Saanich, one of our longtime clients. Located on Vancouver Island, Saanich is a forward-thinking municipality serving a community of over 120,000 residents. Adrian plays a key role in driving value from their JDE system and leading strategic improvements for the organization. And as always, a few housekeeping notes before we begin. If you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat and we will address them in the Q&A at the end. And if you miss anything, don't worry, this is being recorded and we will share the recording with you via email afterwards. And with that, I'll hand it over to Matt to get us started. Thanks and enjoy.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Marcella. Yeah, as Marcella said, really excited to have Adrian join us and hear a little bit about the Saanich story on this topic. We'd like to just kick it off with a quick little poll, just to get a little sense of everybody's feelings around continuous delivery. So I'm going to ask Avnish to kick that off for us. And I will say that this is also our first time using this webinar tool. So if there's any technical hiccups, we're just going to blame it solely on that, not on the quality of the presentation here. So see if that poll comes up. Otherwise, I'll just jump right in. Looks like I might have to jump right in because I do not like awkward silence.
Oh, the poll is on, Matt. I see people.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't see it on my side. Okay, well, like as you're filling that out, oh, there it is. New features and current customizations are the main drivers for the poll here. Okay.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Good to know.
Right. I'm going to take that off. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Avnish. Okay. Well, we'll address some of that as we go through the rest of our presentation here. So quick little agenda. We're just going to talk a little bit about how continuous delivery is just a little bit more than an upgrade. Things that we maybe traditionally thought of an upgrade, a little bit different. We're going to talk about how it's a little bit part of an operational excellence game plan for your organization. And then we'll hear Adrian and the story from Saanich, a few minutes at the end for some questions. So why continuous delivery? Question that we have here. Why is this different than an upgrade? Why is it more than just an upgrade or different from an upgrade? And when we get into these kinds of things, I like to just paint a little picture. And so here's the situation. This is just things that we hear all the time from our customers as they're dealing with this stuff. We know that to get a JDE update, whether it's a tools, whether it's an ESU, you name it, whether it's a full code current, you need to have them periodically, but they are also self-managed. You need to take care of that yourself or with your service provider. I think we can also all agree that generally these things are disruptive. sometimes minor disruptions, sometimes very large disruptions. Things for the business that we have to get them plugged in to all of this as well. The fact is, it's not just hit a button, show up on Monday, and everything's perfectly fine. There's going to be some disruption there. Another point that comes up often, which we saw in the poll there as well, is these customizations. Super important, great feature of JD Edwards, but it adds to an effort across every single upgrade or update or continuous delivery. There's retrofitting that needs to happen to make sure that it still works. Nobody's quite yet solved the testing problem and time requirement on that. So that just needs to be factored in. And then, as the majority of the poll said, yeah, we want to take on these new features, but then how do you do that? How do you really enable some of those new features throughout the rest of the upgrade process? So, with that sort of being the common situation that we tend to see out there, it sort of translates its way over into this why it matters. We could find that systems can get quite out of date because all of those things that we saw on the last slide are really hard. So it's not super important. We'll just wait. Now all of a sudden we're out of date. That then bleeds into some security vulnerabilities that can creep in. And then ultimately, unsupported technology platforms become your upgrade driver instead of the new features that are out there that increase business value. And so that now becomes, a very technical problem versus a business driven problem. How do we capture value? How do we get any return on investment from these types of projects? And so finding our way out of that is really one of the goals for continuous delivery. And I touched on these ideas of value drivers around a transformation effort for an organization back on a webinar I did in January. And so as you move your way through this idea of transformation, you can focus on a couple of different areas. Common ones that we see are improving the client experience, being more excellent in how you operate your organization and the tools that you're using for that, or creating new business models. And really, when we think about ERP systems, operational excellence really comes to the forefront. And how do we then use this idea of operational excellence around our ERP systems to continuously drive value out through our business? And we do that through, or we talk about it in this sort of customer journey paradigm, this operate, automate, evaluate, and transform. Where, and again, I went through all of these, in much more detail in that January webinar, but focusing just on the operate side here, thinking about this from a customer journey and what an ERP, what operating your ERP and continuous delivery does is it allows you to use all of the features as best as possible, which includes, by the way, some of the automation features, some of the evaluation features around better data and analytics there, but without thinking about continuous delivery as a key service or key task that you do and just the daily operation. And daily maybe too strong of a word here, but certain this regular interval of how you keep the system up to date. That's the things that really fit into this operate piece. That really starts to enable things moving forward such that you can leverage more automation, that you can leverage more evaluation, and ultimately transform the whole ERP over time into something that's a really well-oiled machine there. And so, how continuous delivery supports operational excellence? Couple of ways here. First and foremost, it's keeping JDE current through this continuous investment, right? You may be aware of how much you pay Oracle in terms of a maintenance as per your contract. Well, they're taking that money and they're investing in it, right? They've adopted this idea of continuous innovation, meaning that we don't have to wait until a major tools release or major code release to take advantage of some of these features. They're continuously innovating the same code line, both from tools and from an application perspective. Um, and for us to, or for you to have continuous delivery, you can take advantage of that continuous investment there. So it's money spent, but you're able to think about, if you think about it, the flow of money and investment, where it's going, your maintenance dollars are going to Oracle, they're innovating, and then you're taking the features. Now you can start to adopt those features, and that time between when you pay that maintenance dollar and when you can use that new feature starts to shrink or become more predictable, at least with continuous delivery here. By having these the latest and greatest features, both from an application perspective and from a tools perspective, you're ready to leverage the automation and some of these other features, right? Just having them ready to go, I think, is a really important thing, because what's happening in the business landscape and the industry landscape for your organization, you may need to be able to react really quickly. And so again, having a regular plan of when the system is being updated allows you to leverage that as soon as possible and not wait for an event to happen. Well, now I need to actually do this upgrade. Now I can take advantage of that. So it's being ready. It's being having it be available for you as an organization. And I think this too, we have to think about this way from a fundamental change in how you receive and implement these updates. And Adrian will get into the methodology that Saanich has used to kind of break this down. But this is not on one end of it waiting for 9.x, whatever it could be, right? It's not going to happen. So if you're sitting around waiting for that, and that old way of, well, we're just going to wait for the latest code release, new version, brand new version of JDE, and then we'll do this big capital project. We'll ramp up a huge team. We'll do all of that work. We'll get it implemented, and then we'll just sort of let it coast along for a few years until they release the new one. Right? That's not happening. But it's also, let's not think about it from the episodic events either, right? We don't want to just have these one-off tools releases or ESU applications when things break, right? It's about having a game plan in place, which we'll get to in a little bit, so that you can really have this charted out over a number of years. Okay. And so it's important that we really, I want to drive home the point of the why for this continuous delivery a little bit more here. It's not just taking updates more frequently. Because just doing that doesn't eliminate some of these challenges, pains, disruptions, the pain points that we talked about, that just come alongside all of our upgrade projects. And I don't mean this to scare anybody away from doing this ever. It's really about thinking it through from, how is this different and how can I plan for this accordingly, to do that. Okay. And so quickly here, why we think, or how we think continuous delivery is different from that regular upgrade. First, it's planned out, multi-year cycle. It doesn't just consider the latest tools or a one-off feature that I might need within the organization. It starts to create some alignment with our IT groups and the hardware and the infrastructure that JD Edwards is running on. It starts to consider release schedules of, say, for example, Windows releases, and how do we want to align JD Edwards, which might run on Windows in your situation, with a broader plan that IT has. How might it align with even a cloud strategy that we might have going down in the future? Certainly hosting JDE on that. It also considers maybe different intervals from, doing tools release and code current releases at different intervals for different reasons and purposes and all of that. The goal here is that there's a multi-year cycle, a game plan in place that you can look at and say, I know what's going to happen over the next number of years, and bring in other stakeholders from the organization really to help out with that. And it also has this idea of explicitly addressing decustomization, how to adopt new features and functionality, and making sure that the right testing is done at the right time so that you de-risk a lot of the effort in that upgrade there. and some of the changes that happen. So anytime a system changes, we know that there can be risk involved in that. So not only are we addressing that, but we're also improving the system. We're not just doing this whole project to be running the same system along the way. So last from me before we hand it over to Adrian, a little bit how we help our customers plan for continuous delivery. The first two here are really around analysis here, right? So what's the operating system version and timelines that you have? What's the runway left on that? What's the appetite, the desire to go cloud, host things on the cloud? Will help you understand what that looks like in the context of what's possible for JD Edwards. We can also do this from a customization analysis, either through some of our partner activities that we can work with to help on get just an understanding of all the customizations across the system, and then make a determination whether this is a customization that should be kept. This is core to our business. We have to treat this as such. Or is this something that could be replaced with new base E1 functionality? Or even, we know that there's probably a lot of customizations out there that sit in this. I needed to move this field over. I needed to add this, and we can replace that with a lot of the user-defined object functionality. So, but getting down to an analysis, an output, and therefore a recommendation. Once we have those things that we can really start to quantify the effort and what is the desired pathway out of that, and we can sit down and build an upgrade roadmap. What will the next number of years look like when we consider where you want to go from an infrastructure perspective, or what is possible from a new feature, a decustomization kind of place? And then finally, once we have that in place, we'll document the appropriate testing requirements for the different phases here. How we test for a tools release is going to be different from how we test for code current. We need to write that down. We need to write down what that is. And then we can start to look at how do we automate some of those things to make it even more seamless for the organization, for the end users along the way. So enough about us and how we do it. Wanted to make sure Adrian's got some time here and really talk us through what the bit of the history, the background, and what does continuous delivery look like at the District of Saanich. So over to you, Adrian. You let me know when you want me to advance the slides.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Matt. Really happy to be here to chat with you all today. And I think Matt's done a really excellent job of highlighting, what's the situation, the challenges, the possibilities of implementing this continuous delivery methodology within an organization. So today I want to talk about what the journey for the District of Saanich looked like. And, we utilized all those services that Matt just showed on that last slide through ERP-One. And it's allowed us to create this methodology, implement it, and actually really benefit from it. So before I go into that, I just want to give you folks a little bit of perspective on the Saanich system. So this isn't a system with, one module and 10 users. We are a mid-sized municipality, I would call us, the largest on Vancouver Island. Any given time, we have about 1,800 employees and 300 users within the system. And we use a full gambit of the modules. So we're full stack finance, HR, payroll, asset management, procurement, inventory, probably a few others in there. So we have a half dozen plus modules that we're using extensively. In total, we have about 270-ish documented test cases when we do a full-blown code current. So it's a major undertaking for us. And the way we got into this continuous delivery methodology, and Matt, you can advance the slide now. So when I came into this position in 2021, at the request of the steering committee, I was asked to do a code current. We had done a major upgrade from 8.0 to 9.2 in 2016. We'd implemented HR and payroll in 2017, but we hadn't taken in any tools, any updates, unless they were absolutely necessary ESUs since that time. So we had a 5-year backlog of ESUs that we needed to put into the system. So we got through that project. You know, it was successful. It wasn't fun. It was full of a lot of learning experiences for myself and others. And at the end of it, I was really looking for ways to better integrate the idea of continuously keeping the system up to date. So through that initial project, we managed to do some decustomization in the system, bring in new features and functionalities to the business. But at the end, there was kind of this sense in the back office and the business of like, glad that's over with. We won't have to do this again. Unfortunately, I knew that we would in fact have to do it again. So I needed to figure out a way to make it more palatable. I wanted to create an approach that was able to generate buy-in from the organization and have our system updates viewed as a regular cadence of running a tight system, as opposed to these individual projects that would hit these yearly work plans without a lot of visibility. Now, this isn't a concept I came up with on my own, working with ERP-One and, kind of looking across the industry at what best practice was. That idea of continuous delivery is out there, and Oracle's been pushing it for many, many years as well. We can go to the next slide here. So through this, we created a continuous delivery methodology that worked for Saanich. For us, this came in the form of a briefing note, which was supported by our leadership, that allowed us to develop regularly scheduled updates to the system and work with all stakeholders involved to get buy-in and support. So within the note, we kind of highlighted 5 major areas that require regular updates. We have our security patching, third-party programs such as, Vertex or Data Access Studio. We have tools upgrades. We have full application updates or code currents, and we have targeted updates such as, year-end payroll and stuff like that. So some of these updates are a given. We're going to do our critical security patching every quarter, and we're going to take our year-end payroll targeted ESUs. That's just something the organization has become accustomed to, and it's kind of, we have a well-oiled kind of process around that. However, with this approach, we were given agency to work with the organization on when the other updates should be taken. So we started this by developing a loose schedule of when the updates would occur and approximately how long they would take. This became a baseline that was understood throughout the business. We do tools each year and a code current and a tools upgrade every 2 years. Tools occurred in the winter. Code current was always done over the summer. Each time an upgrade project was done, we'd ensure that the value of the business was highlighted. And if tools wouldn't provide any immediate value, we could skip them because we knew we were going to grab the next tools, which would get us up to date in the following year. And finally, because leadership provided their support of this methodology, it actually allowed me to bake in the funding for these projects to my reoccurring budget request each year. So sustainment was no longer funded on a project by project basis. Instead, it became part of my boilerplate in my budget memo. So I just have a line item that's, will change a little bit each year, but it just says JDE continuous sustainment, X number of dollars. And I can then use that pot of funds to schedule whatever upgrade program projects will fall into that year. So this removes a lot of the guesswork from it, removes the urgency around trying to spend budget because I have it in this year and I'm not going to have it next year, so on and so forth. You can progress to the next slide, Matt. So, and if you don't mind just jumping through the animations here,
Oh,
I'll
yeah.
just cover them. So I talked a little bit about, okay, what have we done? We created this briefing note that said, hey, we're going to do this at these times. Here's the testing requirements. Here's a rough schedule. So we actually just went out with the business and we worked with them to figure out what works best. And we kind of have a bit of a playbook for how we do our updates now. 2025 is the third code current we're going to be doing, and I'm kind of in the planning phase right now. We actually just got our impact analysis sheet from ERP-One yesterday, so that's kind of the first step in diving in. But what's important here is the methodology we've created has given us this wonderful flexibility, and this year we're seeing it for sure. So this year we're faced with a few curveballs. The newest tools upgrade requires an OS uplift across all of our servers, which necessitates, in our case, new server builds. There's a desire from our IT folks to move our existing or new JD servers into a new OU structure that may cause some challenges. So to get a tools upgrade through this year, we could be faced with having to spin up new machines on a new OS and place them into a new OU structure, all while also testing and validating code current implementation across multiple environments. So we're faced with a decision this year centering around a few things. How much capacity does the organization have, especially in the back office? Because we're doing maybe a lot more technical stuff this go around than we normally would. How much value would this tools upgrade provide? Because we could take our code current and leave tools for next year. How much risk is associated with each of these challenges? So if we do the OS uplift and move forward, how risky is that? Do we have the folks to support it, to set it up properly, so on and so forth? We're really able to take a look at all that. And because our methodology has delegated this decision making back to the business, I can work together with the business and the back office to determine the best path forward. We'll figure out what's going to provide the most value in the least risk kind of scenario, and then we're going to go for that. If we decide that tools doesn't provide us anything useful, or that the server OS uplift represents one risk too many, we can instead defer the update to our next cycle and proceed with what works best for us. It removes the pressure of having to cram everything into a single project that has budget for current year, and instead allows us to get done what we think is achievable in the current year with our ongoing continuous delivery funding. So in conclusion, the creation of this methodology within Saanich has allowed the business to come together to decide what's best for us and the system we depend on each day. This is done really collaboratively, and it's really brought a sense of ownership and pride to the folks involved with the system. While the system still has its detractors, they're far fewer than they were, 4 or 5 years ago. And I'll say, I was talking about this decision we had to make. We did get together as a group just a couple days ago internally, and we decided we have the capacity, we can handle the risk. So we're going to go ahead with the entirety of this push, because value is there, and everybody's kind of excited about keeping our system as up to date and running as tightly as possible. So I think we've turned around some attitudes, and we really keep a pretty clean system these days. It's the end of my spiel for now, and I hope that provides some kind of real world experience. I will say, because I'm in municipal government, there are few secrets. And if you are interested in chatting about anything, Matt can always provide my contact info. I'm also happy to share that briefing note I was speaking of. It was written years ago. I was kind of a little green in my position, but happy to share that info if it would help anyone. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Adrian. Yeah, Marcel, I'd probably hopefully have a couple of questions here. But in the meantime, I'll just put this up and say thanks to everybody. I know we're just a couple minutes left in our time here. Feel free to reach out via email if you want any additional information. QR code, book a call with me as well if you want to just chat about any of this in any more detail. So I'll call that out. We'll leave this up. Were there any questions out there, Marcella?
Yes, one just came through. Are there any tools or techniques that can help with testing or retrofitting?
Yeah, for sure. I can talk about this a little bit. Adrian referenced the impact analysis. So that's just a native JDE tool, provides a ton of information about what's changing when you're going through these projects. It really looks at your system versus what's going to be new. Beyond that, one of our partners that we work with, a company called DWS Global, they've got a couple of tools in this space as well, where they can do an analyze tool of all your customizations, which then can start to drive forward a retrofitting plan. They also have a automated testing tool. So you have to feed that with a lot of your own test scripts, but then it is button click. And one trend that I'll say, so that's the first one is native JDE tools. Then we get into some of the DWS stuff. And then the last one that I'll talk about is using orchestrations for testing and automation. We're starting to see that happen a lot more. I wouldn't say that it's super mature across the board yet, but we are starting to see a bit more of that. And something that we're really helping customers explore what that would look like, to use some of the tools that are built right into the latest releases to help take the latest releases easier along the way. So more value add when it comes to taking the latest release.
Yeah, and I'll say on the tools and techniques for testing or retrofitting, impact analysis sheet has been huge for us. It's very easy to use. It's very comprehensive. The one I received just the other day is 19 gigabytes worth of data, but it is a couple, drop down filters for me to see what I need to see and parse that information. Um, on the testing side, just a technique of properly structured test cases. It allows us to run through them much, much quicker. And I do see a question from John here. Says, impressed with the regular cadence of Saanich updating JDE. What helped you enable annual tools upgrades? So that's a really good question. Beyond just that methodology, the briefing note, the support from leadership was really two things. One, we wanted to get the business excited about tools. So whenever we're about to take a tools, always look at the net change. And if I can see a feature that will allow me or our developers at ERP-One to do something new, I'm going to highlight that out to the business. I'm going to bring it to the all managers meeting, or I'm going to bring it to my finance managers meeting and really show them what I can do, or what we could do. So we use a ton of UDOs, we use a ton of orchestrations to make our users' lives easier here. And tools is really about kind of increasing the power of those things. So it's much easier for us to sell that. On the other end is we've also removed the burden of tools specifically on the business, because it's largely, that top layer that's not going to necessarily affect the standard applications and the way in which they operate. So the testing requirements are quite a bit lighter than a code current. I think we do about 270 test cases for a code current and maybe like 110 for a tools release. And myself and my coworker do the 110 ourselves, and then we just review with the business. We very rarely find anything. If we do, we get it fixed. We make sure the business knows about it. They can do that additional test. But we've just taken that burden away from them. So it kind of happens behind the scenes, and then we tell them, hey, we have all these cool new things we could do for you. And folks tend to get pretty excited about it.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. Great additional context there.
Yeah,
for sure. We're just a couple minutes over, so I'm going to wrap it up. It doesn't look like there are any other questions coming through. So thank you again, Adrian, for joining us. Thank you, Matt. That was great. And thank you everybody else for joining us today. As I mentioned earlier, I will be sending out an email with a recording as well as a webinar survey. As a thank you for completing the survey, you'll receive a Starbucks gift card as a token of our appreciation. And then in the meantime, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. We're always sharing helpful tips, insights, and blog posts. And we hope to see you at our next webinar. Thanks again and have a great day.
right on. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, everybody.